All right, so in the basement, or on any floor really, you need to make sure everything's properly prepared. So in this video, we're going to talk about self-leveling and getting this floor ready to go. All right, so we've gone ahead and we've gotten everything all prepped up. So when you're using self-leveling, it just runs. It's very thin, very liquidy, very fluid, so it just kind of levels itself out, gets in all the crevices, all the little cracks, all the little divots and so on, and just levels itself out, smooths itself out. One of the downsides to that is if you have any exit points on the perimeter or inside the room, that stuff will just keep pouring in there. So here, for example, we've got a clean out that once this floor is finished, we need to have an access panel around this floor so we can get at the clean out. There's just no way of moving this any further. We needed it for testing, for doing all the stuff, so it has to stay here. So what we did was just took a little bit of cardboard, filled in the box, wrapped it with some tuck tape, and did the same thing on the perimeters. There's some spots here where it goes into the next room where we had to dig underneath the plates. So we want to make sure that the stuff stays inside here and levels out, not going down inside the clean out, going other places to do the leveling. All right, so just a little bit of prep work ahead of time, just going around the perimeter in any of those spots where it can escape on you, and just go around and just tuck it with some tape. That way it's going to stay inside and do what you want inside this room. So when it comes to leveling, self-levelers, there's all kinds of different products. I use one, it's a two-part system, so it's got an adhesive and the leveling compound in it. So you just mix the two together and away you go. Others are just a compound. They're inexpensive, you mix them up like thin set. So you just mix the stuff up, but you have to pre-prime your floors. So you want to, just judge what you want to do in terms of what your budget is and what makes the most sense for you. For here, I just like the idea of just having the primer. It's already pre-measured, pre-mixed, so you don't have to add any water, you don't add anything to it. Just pour it into your pail and then put your dry ingredient in the top, mix it up. And do it in that order, because if you add your dry ingredients into the bucket, then pour your wet stuff on top, you're not going to get it all mixed. There's going to be stuff around the edges. Just think of, baking, making your pancake mix, right? If it's the same idea. If you've got your dry ingredients, you pour your wet ingredients, it takes a little more work to make sure you get everything out of the corners and out of the sides. So same principle here. So always add your wet ingredients into your mixing pail, then put your dry ingredients on top. I usually put maybe about half of the bag in. I'll put the full amount of the wet material that I need. I'll put about half of the dry ingredients on top. Just give it a little mix, just makes it a little bit easier, and then add the second half and mix it up for a couple minutes, and then it's ready to pour. So it's really that simple. So let's get at it. All pre-measured, ready to go. Don't add any extra water, don't add any extra stuff to it. Just all right, once that's done, recycle appropriately. And then just grab the dry ingredients. Like I said, I usually take about half the bag and pour it in there first. Just give it a little mix. The other thing is you don't want to breathe this stuff in either, so just be conscious of the dust coming up, because you don't want to be sucking that in. So that's about half of the bag. I'll just give that a quick mix. That way it just makes it a little easier when you put the rest of it in there, rather than have one big clump in there and have to deal with it. And that is it. It's all mixed up, ready to go. Now, if you've been following this, you remember that we dug all these up so we could relocate all our plumbing. And whenever I cover up any of these trenches that we do, I always leave the cement that we're putting in there, I leave it a little bit lower just for this reason. It just makes it easier to trowel it out and to level things up afterwards. Sometimes, you can get working with cement and you could have everything nice and level here, but you start moving down a little bit further and you're troweling away, filling up the hole with more cement and pushing on it. You could be pushing this side up. So it's really important that you're aware of, just the heights and everything. So you want to check those as you're going. Like I said, I typically leave mine a little bit lower because, for example, in one corner here we had an old floor drain that got removed and relocated to another spot, but the contractors, when they poured the floor years ago, they sloped it down into there. So now we've got different heights on either side of it. So it's much easier to keep it a little bit lower, use self-leveling, pour it over top, let it do all the leveling and smoothing out. It may take a couple of coats. For example, in here, just pouring this out, we may come back in a little bit later and pour a little bit more just to let it feather out a little bit further. But it's an easier way, I feel, to deal with it. Rather than letting the concrete get up too high, you can go over top. If we were just going to put ceramic over top of this, this is at a stage where we could just put a little bit of thin set over top and just allow that to be the self-leveler and carry on from there. In this case, we're going to be using a vinyl plank flooring. We're going to be gluing it down. We'll talk a little bit more about flooring a little further on. But in this case, that's what we're going to be doing here. So we want to allow this just to really level out nicely, because when we glue down the vinyl plank, it's going to take every contour to the floor. So it's important that we get this thing leveled out. So we've got everything all sealed on the edges. We're mixed up, ready to go. So now it's just as simple as taking it and pouring it over top of your patch. You want to give it a little bit of a eyeball just to make sure you're not putting too much on, but enough that it's going to be bridging both sides. I'm just going to leave the bucket because I'm going to mix another bag up right away. But as you move in on that, you can see that it's still continuing to move. You can see it in here. It's just looking for those areas. It's just slowly moving itself out, leveling its way along. All right, so it's doing exactly what we want to do. I'm going to mix up another bucket and just pour a little bit more in through here around our drain and continue to move out and continue to allow this material just to do what it's supposed to do. Okay, and so that's it. We just made up 2 bags, just leveled it out in here. We'll just allow it to do its thing. I helped it a little bit in some of these corners just to get it in there, and then just feathered out the higher spots so that it's done, allowing it to go into the lower spots and just let it do its thing. And then once this sets up, it only takes a few hours. Once it sets up, we'll pour some more and then just allow it to feather out and gradually go out into the hall, into the rest of the space that we need to go. But that's really all it is, just kind of making sure that your floor is prepped. It's really important, especially, again, depending on the application. If you're just using a laminate floor, then you could go over that. If there's some low spots, you can shim it, you can build it up and take care of a lot of that stuff. But because of this, it's more a thinner vinyl. It's going to take the shape because it's going to be glued down. So it's going to take the shape of the floor. So we really want to make sure that we've got this as level as we can possibly get it. So it's going to help the overall look and, the application of the floor, because we don't want it, popping in the different, the joints and all that stuff. So it's important that you have everything prepped and leveled, ready to go. So that's really all it is. We're going to let this set up and we'll continue to make some more bags, go out into the areas, the rest of the place, and then see what it all looks like a little bit. I wanted to just take some time and get you caught up to where we are. Initially, we had gone through and just put a floor leveler down through here. You remember that this whole basement looked like a war zone. At one time, there was about 60 feet or so of trenches dug up for relocating all the plumbing. So when I patched it with regular cement, I went over top it with a thin set just to kind of level things out a little bit, or a self-leveler, sorry, self-leveling, just to level things out a little bit. So we've done a lot of work to get this floor up to where it is. Initially, we were just going to go with a laminate. The homeowners wanted to go with laminate flooring down here. Now we're going with vinyl plank, and it's more like a glue-down product. So we had to do a little bit more work to get this thing up so it's almost like a skating rink inside here. So we're just finishing up the last little bit. We've used the self-leveling through a lot of the area. Then I just used a feather edge just to kind of fine-tune things here and there, just to bring it up. So we've gone through and just given the floor a scrape, just to kind of get any high spots, get any little little blobs that may have dropped off of out of the buckets and stuff as we were going through it. So we've given everything a little sweep, and there's still a few areas that we weren't really happy with. So we thought, well, let's get everybody caught up to where we are, the stage that we're at, just because depending on the floor that you want to use, it that dictates how much preparation you need to go into a floor. When you get into a vinyl plank flooring or vinyl glue down floor, you want to make sure that everything is almost as 100% as close to it as you can possibly get, because all that stuff eventually will show its way through the vinyl, because the material's thinner, it takes the contours, everything. Laminate, you can just lay over top a fairly rough floor, because you can just kind of shim it and adjust it as you go. You can hit the low spots, bring it up to where it should be, but if it's a little wavy, a little bumpy, it's not so bad. So it's something to keep in mind as you consider the flooring that you want to use, especially when you're finishing a basement space. If you're upstairs, that's fine. You can treat it with quarter-inch plywood. You can do all kinds of different things to adjust it. Down in the basement, the concrete floor that's down there, it kind of dictates what's going on. And today, if you're in a newer home, everybody's production minded. And it's not to say there isn't good quality people out there, because there are, but because people are more production minded, they don't take, the real care in doing everything 100%. And I mean, I've been in basements where honestly, it looks like they've taken a garden rake and just raked the cement around the rough ends for the plumbing and just left it like that. And because the builder accepted it, the contractors coming in to do the work, they could just get away with that stuff. And it makes it more challenging when flooring guys come in, or contractors like myself come in. We got to bring that stuff up to make it nice and level, ready to go for particular flooring. So consider what you want to put down, because that's going to dictate the amount of work you put into getting it prepped, because it's all in the preparation. Doing the application isn't nearly as hard as long as you've done good preparation. And so here we've had to do a lot of work to prep this, switching gears from a laminate into a glue down now. So this last little bit, we're just going to kind of go through the last little bit here, just leveling it out with the feather edge. You'll see as as I get down on my hands and knees and do this last little bit, you'll see some of the high spots and some of the ripples and things that we want to get rid of. And the first thing is, remember to, pick the right product for the floor. There's so many different products out there today. You want to make sure you get the right stuff. If you're not sure, ask for advice. There's a lot of good suppliers today, independent suppliers that will give you good advice for the right material to use. So here we're going to use a feather edge just to finish off the last little bit. And it's important to remember to mix it according to what they tell you. Don't guess. Don't say, oh, that looks good enough, unless you're really 100% sure. I mean, after a while, I've mixed stuff so much, I get a good feel for it. So I know when it's right, when it's not right. But still, when it comes to this stuff, I'll mix it, and use proper measuring equipment to make sure I get it in there right. Even if it's just a coffee cup, I just using the right proportions is really important. So when we were mixing it with the bag, we would just pour, use the right amount of water and just pour the dry ingredient into it. It's important to make sure you do it that way, because if you have a pail of dry ingredient, we talked about this before, you get a pail of dry ingredients, especially like these floor levelers, and then you add water to that, now you're just stirring up the little bits in the middle, you're not getting to the outside edges. It's much better to have the wet ingredient in the pail and then add your dry ingredients a little bit at a time, and it makes it much easier to mix, and you get a better consistency out of it. So we're just going to mix a little bit up. With this particular feather edge, it's 2 parts of the dry to 1 part wet. So, it doesn't really matter. If you need just a little bit, you can add 2 cups of the dry ingredient and 1 cup of water, and that's going to give you the right ratio to mix up. So if you need to do little bits, just make sure you do the math to break it down. So we're just going to do the math here now and get ready to do this last little bit. So, like I said, make sure you use good clear water when you're doing this. I'm just going to do a small pail. I've already put two measuring cups of this and in here, so it's already set to go. And I'm just going to do it by hand, just because I don't need that much. So I'm just going to do it by hand here. Typically, you'd get a mixer, a little paint mixer or something, to do it up, but here I can just do it by hand. And mix it up good. You want to mix it up for at least a minute or so, just to make sure you get all the lumps and bumps out of it. Make sure you got a good consistency. Because with this, it's a finished product, so you want to make sure you don't have any lumps and stuff in it, because this is your last step. So you want to make sure it's good and smooth. The nice thing about these products, they mix up so well if you do it with the right ratio and do it the right way. And now remember that you've only got so much pot life, which means once you put it in your bucket, once you put it in the pot, you've only got so much life with this stuff, and then it's going to start stiffening up and you're really going to be working hard. So make sure you've got everybody, all the tools you've got handy. We've already scraped this down, swept it, so we're pretty much ready to go. So I'm just going to start in that corner, work my way over here, and just thin out this last little bit. So you can see some of the darker spots, some of the lighter spots. These are some of the areas that we wanted to get rid of, just to kind of level things out. So, when you get down close, you can see it a little bit better. And because it's a feather edge, it can go right down to, right down to nothing. So it's just like putting on drywall compound. You can put it down nice and thin. And it just gets down in there. And as that's going in there, it's filling in those last little voids. Again, it's just a combination of everything that's gone in over the years in this house. There's just so many different things. Here we got plumbing stacks. Here we've got new areas that we've put in, and everything shows up in various ways on the floor, which we don't want to have happen. We don't want it showing up in our vinyl when it's all done. And you can use a trowel if you feel comfortable with trowels. I always just like the control of an old drywall knife. All right, so the last little bit there I'm not going to use because getting along the edges there, I picked up a couple little crumbs here and there, and I'm just moving those around inside. So I'll need to make up a little bit more to just kind of finish off this little bit. But you can see just, you know, a couple cups of that material goes a long way just in this last little bit. You don't need much. It's like anything else. Sometimes a little less is better than too much because then you're just working down rather than trying to build it up. So sometimes just putting a little bit down and seeing where it goes, how it looks, and then adding a little bit more like what we've done here is the best way to go. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to make up a little bit more and just kind of finish off this last little bit in here. And then we're ready to start gluing this floor down. And so we'll go through that as well and take you on that journey as we start doing the vinyl plank flooring. But that's it. Remember to, you know, prepare things appropriately depending on the condition of the floor, depending on what product you're putting on top. Make sure you get everything prepped up properly because it'll just save you grief at the end. And then years to come, when you're enjoying it or somebody else is enjoying it, you want to make sure that you know you've done it properly so that you don't have to be guessing, and you know you don't want to be getting halfway through the application and find out, oh, I should have built that area up, or I should have feathered this out more. Do it now. Go over it. It's a lot easier to do it. It takes a little bit longer maybe to prepare, get yourself ready, but in the long run it's going to be much easier because once we get focused on flooring, then we can just zip through that and we don't have to worry about whether this is prepped or not. So it's ready to go. Anyways, so that's it. We're pretty much ready to go into the next stage of putting down the floor.